Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for AFI Fest 2021 and for this Q&A for Drive My Car. I'm Malin Kahn, and I'm a programmer with AFI Festivals. And I am so honored to have here with me today, Director of Drive My Car, Ryusuke Hamaguchi. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And
thank you so much.
Yes, many congratulations on this incredible film. I would also like to introduce Aiko Musuguchi, who will be assisting with Japanese interpretation. This film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, where it won the award for Best Screenplay, which is probably where we should begin this conversation. Drive My Car was adapted from a Haruki Murakami short story by the same name, which you've expanded and elaborated on to ultimately create this really beautiful, sprawling, emotional epic. And I just want to ask first how you originally came to this story and what it was that struck you about it.
はい、ありがとうございます。今、そのご紹介いただいた通り、これはドライマイカーというその村上春樹さんの短編を題材としています。で、もともとはそのプロデューサー、前作の寝ても覚めてもというその作品のプロデューサーでもある山本さんという方から村上春樹さんの短編を映画化しないかということを言われました。ただ彼がしてくれたものは自分には難しいなと思っていて、で、8年ほど前にこの、小説を初めてその雑誌に出た時に読んで、面白いなと思っていた。そして自分の、題材と合うなと思っていたので、これを提案し直しました。
First of all, thank you so much for what you said. And as you said about the film, it is an adaptation of Drive My Car. It's a short story by Haruki Murakami. This idea came to me from my producer, Mr. Yamamoto, who worked with me on ASAKO I and II, one of my previous films. He suggested to adapt something by Murakami. He initially suggested a different story to adapt, but I thought this short story, Drive My Car, which is something I had read in a magazine, and I felt that the themes were something that I could work with.
ただ、このドラマイカー自体は日本語で50ページぐらいの本当に短い話ではあるし、映画で言ったら半分ぐらいのところで終わっている、3分の2ぐらいのところで終わっている話でもあります。で、それは長編映画とするのであれば、十分な解決ではないなということを思っていました。なので、何かそれを膨らませる必要があると思っていて、それでその女のいない男たちっていうその短編集に入っている他の小説から要素を取ってくることにしました。で、それがシェエラザードと、キノですね。で、シェエラザードのセックスをした後に物語を語り出すっていう要素は、その家福の妻の要素として、で、そのキノというキャラクター、これもその、夫が、妻に浮気されて、そういうキャラクターなんですけれども、そのキャラクターが最終的にたどり着く、精神的な境地みたいなところを、その家福自身がたどり着くポイントとして設定しました。結果的にそれぞれの要素を、尊重していたら、このような、3時間の映画に最終的になったということです。
So the original story, Drive My Car, is about 50 pages in Japanese. It's a short story, and I felt that it's not quite enough for a feature film. Where the short story ends is maybe around about the 2/3 of the way through for the film itself. For the film that I ended up making. And I felt that it wasn't enough of an end for a feature film. And so I knew I needed to inflate the short story somehow. And so what I did was to go into Men Without Women, which is the short story collection that Drive My Car is from. And I pulled some elements from 2 other stories within that short story collection by Haruki Murakami. The 2 stories are Scheherazade and Kino. In terms of what I pulled from Scheherazade, there is a character who's a wife who starts to tell stories after sex. And that's something that I pulled into the wife's character for Drive My Car. And then from Kino, I actually pulled elements for the character Kafuku in Drive My Car, because there's a character in Kino that that finds out that his wife is having an affair, and the emotional resolution that he ends up in Kino is similar to where Kafuku ends up in my adaptation of Drive My Car. And so as I was incorporating these elements into the story, I ended up with a 3-hour film.
It's notable that the opening credits appear 40 minutes into the film. If you could talk about that and how it kind of set the structure for the film.
はい。この妻との時間というのは原作にはほとんど書かれていない要素でした。ただ、映画にするにあたって、映画っていうのは基本的にあまりそのフラッシュバックとかに向かないものだというふうに僕自身は思っているので、あまり回想シーンは入れたくないということを思ってました。で、ただ、説明することなしに、この家福というキャラクターが持っている悲しみとか苦しみっていうのは観客に理解してもらわなきゃいけないと。ということで、最初にそれなりの時間をとって妻との関係を描くことにしました。で、その妻が亡くなってから、言ってみれば本当の物語が始まるんですけれども、そこでその観客にとって負担があるわけですよね。情報を拾い直さないといけないと。で、その、観客の負担を和らげるためというところがあると思います。この時間に、ちょっと休んでくださいねと。で、それで、物語が新たに始まったら、もう一回その人物の関係性とか、そういうものを拾い直してもらいたいと。そういう思いで、このような構成にしています。
So regarding the credit, starting at 40 minutes in, I needed to show the time that was spent with the wife, the time that Kafuku spends with his wife. And I realized that flashbacks don't necessarily work too often within a film. And that part in the story does not belong in the original. But I needed to be able to show Kafuku's sorrow and where that sorrow comes from. So I needed to show the time that he does spend with his wife. And so I spent a good chunk of time where we show the wife. But then I needed also to, so the story sort of begins after the wife passes away. And there's sort of a re-beginning that happens, and the audience needs to recollect a lot of information in that moment. And I felt that is, in one sense, a burden that I'm putting on the audience to have to work to recollect this information. And so I wanted to give a little bit of time for the audience to rest, and that's where the credits are coming in. And so after the credits come in, the story almost restarts and the audience is asked to pick up more information again.
With all of these changes that you had made in the original story, the kind of structural changes and incorporating the other stories from the collection, did you need to get approval from Murakami for this, for the changes, or what was that process like?
はい。その村上さんの許諾は当然必要でした。ただ一番最初に、その手紙で許諾を、取るようお願いしたときに、このような構成にしますということはもうかなり詳細に書いています。そのシェーラザードの部分を引用するであるとか、その機能のものを引用するっていうことは一応書いていて、でその上で許可をいただきました。で、一回許可をいただいてから本当に何も言われませんでした。本当に自由にやらせていただいたという印象です。
Yes, of course I did need to get permission from Murakami. And I wrote him a letter originally to ask for permission to adapt the story. And in doing so, in my letter, I was quite detailed in the structure that I'm thinking of. I told him that I plan to incorporate details from Scheherazade and from Kino. And so through that letter, I was able to receive permission. But once I received permission, he really didn't have he didn't say anything necessarily. So I was pretty much free afterwards to take it however I want.
Oh, wonderful. I want to ask about acting and performance, which is a kind of crucial metatextual element of this film. You have actors portraying stage actors, but also directing other actors. How did this reflect on the actual process of making the film, whether that's your own experience or what you gleaned from the actor's experience?
ちょっと一度、増渕さんいただいていいですか。
はい、今回の作品に関してアクティングとパフォーマンスっていうのがメタ的に使われている要素だと思うんですけれども、今回その それらに関してご自身の経験が反映されていたり、どういうところからどういう要素を取り入れたりしてるんでしょう。監督としてであったり、俳優さんたちにとってもどういう経験だったんでしょうか。
はい。その自分は演劇というものは、やった経験がないし、そんなに詳しいわけでもないので、基本的にはそのいろんなところを取材しました。ただ、その演劇の演出というのは正直言って、よくわからなかった。いろんなやり方があるんだなということが分かったというところがありました。で、結局のところ、自分が普段やってる方法を使おうということを、考えました。それがその、本読みですね。そのテーブルを囲んでみんなが、本読みを何度も何度も繰り返すっていうことをしてますけれども、それは自分が実際にやってるプロセスでもあります。もちろん多言語ではないですけれども、ただ、その感情を抜いて何度も何度もテキストそのものをその体に染み込ませるっていうことはやっています。でそうすると、何かその俳優から、その人本人と結びついた何かが出てくるような気がしていて、それは実際に自分の現場でもやっているし、おそらくその家福というキャラクターが期待していることでもあるというふうには考えています。
So knowing that I was going to work with elements around theater, I haven't been so knowledgeable about the theatrical world, the play world. And so I went around to research and talk to people. And I found out that there are many ways to work in theater. But I didn't feel like I necessarily understood more. And so what I ended up doing is to go back to my own ways of directing. I refer to the ways that I work, mainly the fact that I also that we see Kafuku do. So I have my actors do readings over and over and read the text over and over until the language really starts to seep into the actors. Of course, I don't work with multi-language in the same way that Kafuku does in Drive My Car, but I do work with text and readings in this way. And I think this process brings out something truthful about the actors themselves as people. I think it connects with something about the actor themselves and brings something out about them. And I think that is part of my process. And I believe that that's also what Kafuku as a character is also hoping to bring out with his actors.
There are many scenes that take place inside of a moving car, which is a challenge in itself, being in that small space. How did you conceive of these scenes, and how did you work with your cinematographer in actually accomplishing them?
はい。その車で撮るのは実際とても負担がある大変なことでした。本当にこんなに大変だと分かっていたら、そもそもやれただろうかというぐらい大変でしたけれども、実際に街の中を走らせるというのは、どれだけ大変であったとしてもやらなきゃいけないことだというふうには思っていました。それはどちらかというと役者の演技のためですね。そのスタジオの中に止め撮りをして撮っている状態では、おそらくその役者の演技が今見てもらっているところまで達するっていうこともなかったというふうには思っています。で、役者たちは本当に狭い空間で大変だったと思います。で、その照明のセッティングもやるたびに本当に1時間以上時間がかかるような状態だったので、集中力を保つのも本当に大変だったと思います。ただその役者がどうやってその問題と対処していたかというのは分かりません。本当に役者の皆さんが優秀で素晴らしい集中力を保って最終的に素晴らしい演技を見せてくれたというふうに感じています。
So I think there is a lot that is put on people by the fact that we were shooting in a car. It was a difficult process, and sometimes I think if I had known how difficult it would be, maybe I wouldn't have done it, but we still did. And it was very important. I felt it was that we must be shooting in a car that was actually driving through a town. I felt that we wouldn't get the same kind of performance if this was done in a stationary car. I don't think I would have gotten the same performance out of the actors. And so I knew that that's something that we really needed to do. And that really did pose difficulties for the actors and the lighting people as well. Whenever we needed to set up lighting, it took a long time. And that also meant that the actors had to keep up their concentration for a really long time as well. And I'm sure that's difficult for an actor to keep up this really intense concentration for such a long time. And when I think about how they managed to do it, I honestly don't know the answer. I think I was very lucky to be working with actors who can do this kind of performance, who brought this brilliant performance to the film despite some of the difficulties.
And while it's perhaps a kind of secondary element to the actual kind of driving scenes, there are also the destinations and the cities that you have stated by name in the film. We have Hiroshima, of course, where the play is set. There's the waste plant, the site of Misaki's hometown, and then this scene at the end with Misaki. Could you speak to the significance of any of these locations?
はい。広島に決まったのはですね、でもこれはある種の偶然でした。もともとはプサンで撮るはずだったんです。それはやっぱり日本の都市ではなかなか車を走らせて撮影をするということが難しい。特に東京、原作の舞台は東京なんですけど、東京では難しいということが分かっていたので、プサンの国際演劇祭に呼ばれるという設定で進めてました。でそれがコロナのパンデミックのせいで、叶わなくなってしまって、慌てて、日本の、どこか地方都市で行われている国際演劇祭というふうに設定を変えようとした。で、その時に、必死で探していたら、この広島という、土地が、見つかったということです。広島のフィルムコミッションが、非常にまず協力的だったということがあります。
So it was, in fact, a kind of coincidence that we ended up shooting in Hiroshima. We had originally planned to shoot the scenes in Busan in Korea. And that was because we knew that it was going to be especially difficult to shoot inside a driving car in a Japanese city, especially somewhere like Tokyo, which is where the original story is set. And so in my adaptation, we were planning on having the character get invited to a theater festival in Busan. However, with COVID, we were unable to shoot in Korea. And so we had to figure out a different city. And so we thought it would be good to work with a city outside of Tokyo, somewhere more rural. And so we ended up working with Hiroshima. And I think part of the reason why we worked with Hiroshima is because they have a wonderful film commission that's very cooperative.
Oh,
で、広島に決めた理由としては他にもあって、それは美しい風景、瀬戸内海の美しい風景があったということもそうだし、広島の国際会議場というその平和記念公園の施設が、劇場としても素晴らしいものを持っていたということがあります。ただ、挙げていただいたゴミ処理工場というのはすごく象徴的な場所だというふうに思いました。広島というのはやっぱり原爆が落とされて、そこから復興を果たした場所でもあるんですけれども、その街に宿っている精神性みたいなものを場所が表現しているような気がして、実際美咲が語ったように、吹き抜けの空間っていうのは、平和の軸線と呼ばれている、その平和記念公園からの伸びている線を塞がないようにするために作られているんですけれども、それを見たときに街全体に宿っている精神性みたいなものを感じて、ここでだったら撮りたいなということを思いました。で、それは結果的に傷ついた人たちが緩やかに再生していくっていうこの物語とも響き合うものが結果的にあったというふうに思っています。松渕さん。
最後に緩やかな後だけ。
緩やかに再生していくということが起きている話なんですけども、それともすごく響き合うものだったと、結果的にですけれども思っています。
So there are other reasons why we worked with Hiroshima. Of course, there's a beautiful landscape that's already there in Hiroshima that definitely drew me. And then, of course, the Peace Memorial Park that Hiroshima has is really important. I think and also the theater that exists in Hiroshima is a beautiful theater, so we wanted to work there. In terms of the waste plant that you spoke about, I think it's very symbolic in the film for me. Hiroshima, after all, is the place where the atomic bomb was dropped, but then also a city that really came back after Reconstruction. And it's a place that really represents sort of the vitality and the strength of the people and the reconstruction that happened after terrible things that had happened. And in terms of the Peace Memorial Park, that was also built so that there would always be a line that exists from the past and moving forward, and so that line will always exist and create a space of memorial. And so I definitely wanted to shoot there. I felt that in some ways that place represents a very gentle line to describe the reconstruction and revitalization of the city. And that's something that I think sort of after the fact, after I had shot, I realized the significance of that.
Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, Ryusuke, for this film. It's really a wonderful film, and we're so pleased to have it in the festival.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well to Aiko for your interpretation, and to our audience, thank you so much for attending and for your continued support. Please visit our website at fest.afi.com for more opportunities to engage with the festival. We would also love to hear from you on social media at #AFIFest. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.